I didn't think the case would succeed. I knew the case would not succeed. I'm not at all surprised. I'm not at all surprised that the Court of Appeal judgment came out in a disappointing way. I am surprised that the quality of the judgment left so much to be desired, but I wasn't surprised that it came out the way it did, which largely accounted for the fact that from the very beginning I thought this is way too premature. We lose a case like this at this point, and as Jack said, it's going to be generations before you get a chance to try again. So you can forget the legal approach for the rest of the next 2 decades. It won't happen until you've got white hair. So where do we go from here? I'm not going to talk about the court, I'm not going to talk about the law. I think they're far greater experts, you've heard from them. But I'm going to talk the way I talk, which is I'm going to tell you about stuff that would appear at first totally disjunctive. I'm going to be talking today about McDonald's, about Greece, about Egypt. And then I'm going to draw them all together in a way that I hope will give you pause, so that you think. Last year, my theme was people in society are not rational, but basically irrationality rules. That was 2014's old hat. This year, my theme is Singapore is not worth a fuck. If you give it so much of a fuck, you are condemned to live the fuck. Basically, it is very obvious that nothing is going to change until you or we, if we give a fuck, go out and change Singapore society. We've got to change society. How do we do that? Haha, we are back to square one. We are back to what we started doing in 1993. We have to encourage LGBT people to come out. When they come out, they have an impact on their straight friends and their families around them, and it changes the social opinions around them. And bit by bit, we change opinions in society. That is the only proven route to societies and countries without human rights protection. We are naive to think that this is a country with human rights protection. Attempting a route on that assessment had a very low chance of success. So, we are back to the questions of coming out, questions of visibility, speaking out. But something has really bothered me for the last 20 years of gay activism. And, you know, in a way, it is as Ravi put it. There's a horrible elitism even in gay activism. And I'm speaking of the elitism not of Chinese males and buff bodies. I'm speaking of the elitism in the form of, oh, we don't want to have anything to do with political parties and partisan politics. That somehow it's beneath us to associate with opposition parties or to, you know, to deal with those who will be out there in the streets and so forth. We shouldn't do that. The progress of much of what we've seen in our neighboring country, Malaysia, has been mostly because the human rights defenders in Malaysia have and never feared associating with, communicating with, sometimes debating and sometimes coordinating or not coordinating with political actors. And it is that which gives them leverage. Our refusal to have anything to do with big P politics is to remove 50% of your potential arsenal. We don't build alliances. We stand alone, aloof. We have nothing to do with aware. We have nothing to do with the environmental activists. We have nothing to do with death penalty activists. Don't be surprised if you stand alone. And nobody's going to speak up for you. We have to strengthen the overall liberal cause, because this is what it is. It's just one component of a much broader cause. And that's how you have strength together with other issues. And you know, the liberal cause is a very noble cause. We are not the kinds of world, we're not the kind of world we are today if not for very many heroes through the years and through the millennia and the centuries. It is one of the most endangered causes. And this is where I speak of Egypt. So what happened after the revolution 2 years ago? So I think it was 3 years ago, 2011. January 2011, 3 years ago. They overthrew an authoritarian regime, and they held the first free election in Egypt. And what happened? Who won? You mean you guys don't know? You see what I mean? That stand aloofness from the rest of the world, from what's going on? Who won the Egyptian election? The Muslim Brotherhood. And what did they do next? They started to reduce the rights of women and the rights of Christians and the rights of the secular. You see, I want you to think. Sometimes democracy is not a good thing, you know. Doesn't always help the liberal cause. And I think that a lot of people have pointed out that liberalism must come first. Otherwise, democracy is even worse for it. Yes. So it's very important to entrench liberalism. And so if you let the opposition parties today in Singapore cry and scream, democracy, 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 you're going to get democracy. And then you're going to live the fuck. Because you're going to get the democracy in which the Gilbert Goals of this world will reign supreme. And you can forget the liberal values.
Where's the McDonald's plan?
Coming. Look, I'm saying this, that there are several more digressions, but I really don't want to go into them because, well, maybe they are important, you know, they don't. Okay, here's another digression that I think you should mull over for a while. The thing about defeats is that sometimes the victor ultimately loses. Okay, I'm moving slightly from the totally black and negative opinion to maybe slightly brighter. Okay. Look what happened to...
You're suffering from bipolar.
Hey, it's a noble disease too.
It's a gift.
Let's look at what has happened to the Christian fundamentalist evangelical churches of the USA. They spent... I'm sorry, you can't see me. I always feel better this way. My stomach is not so... At a certain age, you know, yeah, vanity kicks in. But anyway, what happened, you know, for maybe about 20 years, okay, the evangelical churches were on a roll, all right? They were sort of winning the culture wars. That, at least, I think you're all familiar with, because the LGBT issue is very much affected by what has happened. It's come to Singapore, too. Notably, in the 2007 debate, when somebody pointed at noses and various drinking instruments. But you know, in the long run, you know what has happened? Those churches lost credibility. They started losing followers. Today they are in decline. Now, this is where I come in. I would say, be careful. You use the Constitution to stop an aspiration. It may not be that the aspiration suffers. The Constitution may lose respect. And this happens again and again throughout history. When there's an aspiration, and you keep on insisting that no, it cannot be done, no, that will never be possible because of this, because of that, eventually the person who says no is the one who loses credibility in the long run, provided the aspirationists are persistent enough. And now let's talk about Greece. Who won the latest election?
Syriza.
How many seats in parliament? Is it the final count? 145, or a little bit shorter than the initial count. I heard 147, but maybe. Yeah, okay. Just short of a majority, but still an enormous victory. Right? An enormous victory. But they're going to be up against Angela Merkel, who's going to say no, 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 no. And God knows how many people from Brussels, the European Central Bank is going to say no, 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 no. Let's see what happens in the long run. Who won the election over the weekend in Queensland? Was there an election in Queensland?
We know Abbott lost.
Yes! Abbott
Oh,
got trounced. Alright? No, he didn't lose it. He didn't stand for election.
The party.
But the party, the Liberal Party, got trounced completely. This is the party of climate change deniers, people who wanted to, you know, privatize state assets and all that. There goes your new liberal philosophy. So this is the flip side, okay? So don't be totally discouraged. Just be persistent, okay? But you have to play that very long game, because say the evangelical church, it took 20 years for that loss of credibility to become visible, because it kept on saying no for too long. Third thing, another digression, but I'll come back to that. One of our greatest strengths as Singaporeans is that I'm speaking to you in this language, English. That we abandoned our so-called mother tongue. Actually, it was never my mother tongue, because my mother spoke to me in English, but anyway. And when we adopted English, it's also one of our greatest weaknesses, because it has fucked our minds. You know why? Is the Egyptian constitution worth the paper it is written on? Come on, how many of you say yes? How many of you say no?
How many have read it?
Correct. Is the US Constitution worth the paper it is written on? Is it worth more than the Egyptian Constitution? Right. I think that's a certain sense of the people who are admitted typical Singaporeans. This is the difference, you know. When I ask a question like that at NUS, okay, Yeah. When I ask a question at NUS, I can spot who are the foreign students and who are the Singapore students. The foreign students will respond. The Singapore students all keep quiet. I don't know. Those are the foreigners over there. And all these are Singaporeans. I know straight away. Anyway, where was I? Okay, yeah. Is the Singapore Constitution and the value scale closer to the Egyptian or closer to the US in your value scale? Which is it? Which is worth? What's the worth of the Singapore Constitution to you?
There's no gender, there's no sex, so how?
It's not worthy to call a constitution.
All right. Come, finish my talk for me.
And freedom of expression.
Okay, it's like this. One of the curses of Anglicization is that we have imbibed a lot of the baggage, a lot of modes of thinking from the Anglo-Saxon historical experience, which is that constitutions are permanent things of quasi-sacredness. They rarely change. If ever so, it is incremental. And you must hold it in great respect, because it's very important. It's a peculiarly Anglo-Saxon experience. Almost every other nation on this earth has changed constitutions like they change clothes. Think about it. How many revolutions did China have in the 20th century? About 4. I think that's a good number. I agree with you. 2 proper revolutions and 4 revolutions. And after each revolution, the whole structure of their politics changed. The whole way they decided to govern the country would change. How many revolutions, how many constitutions has the United States had since 1776? Is the United States today the first republic or the second republic? Huh? It's actually the second republic. Second. They had one constitution. Well, it's not quite a constitution. It was called the Articles of Confederation. It didn't work. It fell apart. They all broke up in argument. They had to rewrite the constitution all over again. France. Today, France is in its 5th republic since 1789. Portugal. Every 20 years, another constitution. And let's not talk about Thailand. Right? So, I am saying to you, and all these lawyers here, their rice bowl all depends on arguing the finer points of the Constitution. The non-lawyer here is going to say, forget it, it's not worth that much. Okay, we should see in that kind of perspective. A Constitution is just an operating document, SOP. You know, how much is the SOP in your company worth? All right, same value standard. That's what it is. It can be changed. And if you don't change, that's where your problem is, actually. McDonald's. How many of you have been to the US recently? Have you seen some new burger joints? Have you eaten at, say, Five Guys? Or Chipotle? And now there's a new one, just a massive IPO. Incredible value, what, $780 million worth of IPO because they only have 35 restaurants. A new burger chain with 35 restaurants raised $85 million, nearly $1 billion. It's called Shake Shack. McDonald's has had profit for 13 months. They just fired the CEO.
And brought in a brick, which is interesting.
No, temporary guy. Right? And there's a good article out there trying to analyze why. Why is McDonald's in such a funk? And one of the better articles I read was that McDonald's built its success on the system. Right? It was a very efficient system for generating the standard burger, the standard Big Mac, your chicken wings and nuggets and all that kind of thing. But it's the system now that's holding us back. They can see the challenges coming from the new joints. They can even see Burger King undercutting McDonald's in price. The cheapest McNuggets now, cheapest nuggets now are Burger King nuggets, not McDonald's nuggets. So if you want to compete on price, go Burger King. So McDonald's is being squeezed by the new, slightly high-end burger joints and the lower end, maybe even the street vendors. And a lot of people think they know what McDonald's needs to do to change, to improve its bottom line. But they can't. They find it very hard to change. First of all, they don't exactly own the restaurants. They're franchisees. You can't exactly tell them. Secondly, your restaurants are designed to produce only certain products. You want to produce new products? Very hard. The kitchen equipment is just not there. They're stakeholders. Okay, what happens if you try to attract a new kind of client, but then you lose the loyalty of your old client and all that? So, all systems eventually face this kind of ossification and inability to respond. Apple now has doubled the stock exchange value of Microsoft, Windows. And the problem with Windows is that because it's Windows, they're stuck. It's very hard to shift the company around. Right? And that's a real problem. So, I am also saying the same thing, the same philosophical analysis can be applied to constitutions. That after a while, constitutions come with a lot of vested interests, stakeholders. Some vested interests include lawyers whose jobs are to defend the constitution. And make the living arguing in court. Well, I mean, some of them have their hearts wear their hearts on their sleeves. I mean, that's great, including our friends here. But really, all constitutions come with vested interests. And when those vested interests, and I'm not talking about lawyers, I'm talking about people who gain from the system, all right? People who gain security, comfort, predictability in this world from the system. And ultimately, what is a constitution? It's one of the operating systems. And when you see that, okay, you really have to begin to wonder, okay, how much is that? How much respect is any constitution worth? And if so, what is the next course of action? So I'm going to leave off here, and I'll sum up in a little bit. In this way, number one. Effectively now, because the Constitution has been used to block this particular human right, you've got to work around the Constitution. In other words, you've got to go, number one, you've got to go out there and change society. The Constitution ain't going to help you. It's going to block you. And number two, you'll be a fool to continue to give the Constitution so much respect, because it's not worth it. Number three, you will have to begin to re-educate yourself. Maoist-style re-education. And Mao did a great thing for China. And I'll say that again. All right? Small digression. If you think for today that there's anything natural about China embracing technology, embracing change, and producing economic development in a way that India seems to have a greater difficulty at, part of that reason is Mao. But I won't go into depth. You think about it for a while. got to do with creative destruction. All right? Okay. So, to the Constitution, right? So, you've got to work around it. And working around it also requires you to re-evaluate what it is worth. And when the time comes, and we have to say to ourselves, gee, we need a far better constitution, one with a strengthened Bill of Rights. We need to rewrite the whole constitution, have a constitutional convention, build a stronger Bill of Rights, a whole new restructuring of what we mean by judiciary and an independent branch of government and all that. Seize that opportunity, but also create that opportunity. Go out, build alliances with other liberal forces out there, other defenders of human rights, and make sure that your aspirations are part of that total agenda of liberalism.